Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's part 3 of the Tech Talks HR Functional Series. Today's topic is Employee Development. My name is David, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be made available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located at the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during the event and at the end. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today, we have from Microsoft, Volker Dues. Volker, over to you.
Thanks, David. So, part 3 of our Functional Tech Talk series on Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. No matter which time zone you're in, I would like to warmly welcome you as well. And on the first slide, there's not only my name, but Rachel Prophet's one as well. The reason for that is Rachel, amongst others, is going to be supporting you with the questions in the background, and she's also there for Q&A in the end, right? And she also contributed significantly to the preparation of this tech talk. So let me move to the next slide, which is my contact information. So my name is Volker, as David just pointed out. You would find my email address here. I am a Fast Track solution architect in the Fast Track team for Dynamics 365. And you would also find my Twitter and my LinkedIn contact details. So follow or connect with me. That would be good. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the objectives of this tech talk and what we're going to cover in this hour here. Employee development and learning is the topic, right? We will start with the process map. That's similar to what you might have seen in the previous episodes of the functional series. And you will see those nice process maps in the upcoming ones as well, most likely. And then we will talk about skill gap analysis, also look at goals and review processes and the configuration, as well as competencies, learning features, and then we will touch upon from time to time and throughout the tech talk on employee development data, and the way you can integrate those. And also, you might be familiar from previous events that we have a nice slide with some do's and don'ts, which help us to communicate to you what we have seen in the field and what we recommend and what not. Right? And then we have in the end of the deck, again, some checklists for you to allow you to go through these and set up your employee development and learning modules. Also, I'd like to point out that we don't cover any detailed aspects of integrations and/or data management, and also licensing is not covered by this tech talk. Now, looking at the agenda, that's the expectable, right? We have goals, reviews, competencies in this sequence. Then we would look into skill gap analysis, learning in the end, followed by do's and don'ts, checklist, and resources. So to get started, we're going to review the process map for employee development and learning. Like our past process maps, we have broken the map into 4 main groups: security, business processes and configuration, as well as administrative tasks and configuration for data management, workflow, and analytics. Let's start by looking at the security roles. First, we have the standard roles for human resources management and assessment, which give access to large portions of the core human resources functionality. There are also roles for the employee, contractor, and manager, which are primarily focused on the self-service capabilities. There is also a role called training manager that specifically gives access to the learning features. And as always, you can create your own custom roles to meet your business needs. We do generally recommend that you duplicate existing roles if you want to make changes rather than editing directly. Now, when we look at the areas we have broken down for the business process and configuration, let's first look at goals, right? Goals are foundational to any performance management program. If you plan to use goals, you will need to configure measurements. These measurements are also shared with reviews. In addition, you will need to create categories, templates, and groups. This configuration makes the process of managing goals easier. While not mandatory, they are highly recommended. Once you have completed the configuration, you can begin to create goals. If you are using a top-down approach, you will likely use templates and groups to mass assign goals to large groups of workers. You can also copy activities from performance journals into the goals to track the progress on goals. Next, we have reviews. Most organizations have a review process, whether formal or informal. Your organization's culture will likely drive how you use the system for the review processes you have. We encourage to strive for more data capture as data allows you to make better decisions. To get started, you will need measurements and rating models, which are shared with competencies. You will also need to create review types, performance periods, review templates, and performance journal source types. Once you have completed the configuration, you can start to create the reviews and following your review process. Moving down, we have competencies. There are a variety of different types of competencies that can be tracked in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. To start using the features, you will need to go through the basic configuration for each type of competency. For skills, you will need to track skill types, skills, and then you can begin to create skills on jobs and workers. Likewise, you will need certificate types before you can create certificates on jobs or workers. In order to start adding education details to workers, you will need to create institutions, degrees, education disciplines, and categories. In our last area, we will talk about learning. The learning capabilities of Dynamics 365 HR are designed to help organizations keep a record of what courses are needed for a worker and which courses have been taken. To start tracking details, you will need course types, locations, instructors, classrooms, and course groups. This data is likely to be integrated directly with your LMS or CMS. Then you can start creating and assigning courses. Workers can also register for courses in ESS. So, moving on to the administrative areas related to the employee development and learning, we will start by looking at data management. There are a variety of entities that are designed to specifically support skills, goals, reviews, and courses. While this is not a comprehensive list of all the entities, this is a key place to get you started with importing, exporting, or integrating your data with external systems. Next, we have workflows for the employee development. These workflows help you manage the process in your organization, especially if you are allowing your workforce to manage their own data from ESS, the employee self-service workspace. And then finally, we have analytics, which are focused on employee development and learning workspaces, respectively. These out-of-the-box Power BI dashboards are designed to help you analyze the position of your workers' skills and learning. Before we dive into the details of goals and performance, let's take a quick look at the process of managing performance at a higher level and how the reviews, goals, and performance journals feed into the overall process. There are three key processes and respective pages that help you manage performance. The first is the performance journal. This page is used to track the details. When you send feedback, for example, the system automatically creates a performance journal. You can manually create performance journals as well to keep track of activities related to goals or reviews, as well as for specific events, like when you put a worker on a performance plan, for example. Goals. Goals can be used and tracked independently or with a performance review. You can use templates to make the process easier when there are similar goals across the organization or departments. You use measurements to track the progress of a goal. And then we have the performance review. Performance reviews are used to track the periodic discussions that you are having with your workforce about their performance. This can be anything from a one-on-one, annual review, or anything in between. When you use review templates for the different types of conversations you have with your workers, it makes the process easier to maintain. You can use measurements on the review to rate a worker. This data is often used in the compensation process to determine who receives raises or bonuses and how much. So, to dig into the details more, we're going to start with managing goals. You can create any number of goals, and those goals can span different periods and performance reviews. You can also create simple or complex goals, depending on the amount of information that you want to enter about the goal. Goals are not required for performance reviews. And a basic goal must include the following information: a short name, a longer description of the goal, the anticipated start date for the goal, and the estimated completion date for the goal. Let's talk a little bit about goal properties. You can also specify a goal category to help you organize your goals. Examples of goal categories might be personal, team, product, etc. You might also create categories based on organizational strategic objectives like accessibility or diversity and inclusion. If you have more detailed instructions for a goal, you can create goal topics. These topics include a title and a description. You can include as many topics as you require to help guarantee that the details of the goal are clear to both the employee and the manager. Examples of a goal topic might provide further details about your organization's strategic objectives. Taking the example of diversity and inclusion, a goal topic might be more specific, like take the unconsciousness bias course and identify areas for improvement. Both employees and managers can also enter comments about the progress on the goals. Goals often have measurable results. You can add measurements to track the target goal results and the actual results. If the measurement is a stretch goal, you can mark the measurement by using the stretch goal option. An example of a goal with a measurement might be a sales goal or a customer satisfaction rating like an NSAT score. The performance journal. So the performance journal will contain activities that provide managers with more information about how a worker accomplished their goal. If you've linked a performance journal to the goal, it appears in the activities section of the goal. You can also add a new performance journal from the performance goals page. That performance journal will be automatically linked to the goal. Performance journals can also be used by managers or HR to track activities or events for a work on a performance plan. For example, you might track when the employee is late to work. If you want to attach a document to the goal, such as a certificate of completion, you can attach it in the attachment section of the performance goals page. A document viewer is provided so that you can quickly view the contents of any attached document. Examples where you might attach documents include course completion certificates or a performance plan document. And then finally, you can create a template from a goal and then use the template to create new goals that are based on the template. When you create a template from a goal, the description, topics, and target measurements are saved. However, all actual measurements, completion dates, and topic comments are removed. When you create goal templates, you can easily mass copy the goals to all workers or a group of workers. This is great for organizational goals and departmental goals, for example. All right, let's talk a little bit about the approaches and considerations around goals. When getting started with goals in your Dynamics 365 Human Resources solution, we will want you to start by considering the culture of your organization. If this is your organization's first time pursuing a system to track goals, speak with workers at different levels in the organization, including management, to determine what is needed by the business to support day-to-day operations. If you have had a failed attempt at implementing a solution, be sure to consider the feedback and try to address the concerns why the last system or process was not accepted by the business. You will want to think about the organizational approach to the goal setting process next. Consider if you will use a top-down, bottom-up, or hybrid approach and how that differs from the approach you use in your legacy systems and business process. When using top-down approaches, templates will help simplify the process. When using a bottom-up approach, consider if a workflow with Power Automate is required. With either approach, consider communications and alerts about the goal to the appropriate users in the chain. To get the most value out of the system, you will want to consider the user adoption. If you made the most amazing goals in the world, it doesn't matter if nobody knows about it, doesn't use the system to track the progress, and so on. When the goal process is different or your organization is using goals to help make cultural shifts in the organization, you will want to carefully consider your change management, training, communication, etc. Lastly, is the usability and mobility of the solution. Usability considerations should not only include the interface look and feel, number of clicks, the process flow, and the ability for users to walk up and use the system without training, but you will also want to consider language constraints, accessibility, and so on. You will also want to test and consider the types of devices your users will be accessing the functionality from. You may need to design specific pages that are mobile friendly or consider the use of a Power App, for example. Now let's switch gears from goals to reviews. You can quickly create small meetings for two people, such as a one-on-one meeting, or you can build more complex reviews that match the review process of your company. A meeting, such as a one-on-one, is a simple review and requires a short name, a longer description of the contents of the meeting, and the date of the meeting. A simple review includes the same information plus the review period that is being discussed. Managers will also see the name of the person that the review is created for. For more detailed reviews, you can pull in active and completed goals and enter comments about them. All performance journal activities and measurements that are related to a goal will appear on the review. After the review is finalized, a snapshot of the measurements is stored to retain the history of those items at the time of the review. You can also use the competencies section to discuss, review, and rate the employee's competencies. You can add as many competencies as you require, and you can choose whether the competency must be rated. You can create new reviews that are based on templates that you've created. For example, you can have a template for one-on-ones, development plans, or periodic reviews. You can select the template when you create a new review. Review types. Each review type allows various parameters to be enabled or disabled. With Enable Workflows for this type checkbox selected, any review assigned to the review type will utilize a workflow. For example, you likely don't need a workflow on a basic one-on-one, but you might want a workflow and more controlled process around a review that puts a worker on a performance plan. We can also determine if all reviews of a particular type should be editable while in final review. We can also decide if the employee, the manager, or both will be required to sign off on the review once completed. Review types include appraisal, budgeting, coaching, and some more, right? So these are examples for that. Let's move on to the performance journal. The performance journal is the place where you can document activities and events related to goals, reviews, or just in general. In addition, you can create future activities that must be completed to help you accomplish a goal, meet the requirements of a development plan, or meet a performance commitment. Performance journals aren't required in order to create goals or performance reviews, but they are created automatically when you send feedback. With that in mind, there are multiple sources that performance journals can come from. This includes your own feedback, activities and events, feedback that comes from your manager, and feedback that comes from a coworker through the send feedback feature. When you use the send feedback feature, the system will automatically notify the manager and the person sending the feedback and the manager of the person receiving the feedback. We'll see that shortly. Because we will now jump into a quick demonstration of the performance journal and the send feedback functionality. So we're starting in the employee self-service workspace, right? The application is the merged platform already. That's why it's a preview of 10.025. And the capabilities are there then already. So we're in the role of Julia. Julia is a manager in sales and marketing. And now the first thing we want to do is send feedback to a coworker. And we're going to send feedback to Jody. And so we have clicked the button, send feedback. Now we simply pick the coworker we want to send feedback to and provide a description. In the small text between the description and the worker name, you can already see that the names of the managers of both Julia as well as Jody are mentioned, and they would get notified about the feedback, right? So Jody has done great in setting up Dynamics 365 HR, and we want to thank her and send that through. So we can see the feedback was created, and we can also see that emails would have gone out if SMTP was set up properly in that machine, which wasn't the case, but would work in your environments, hopefully. So, and after we have created that feedback, the send feedback, it has created a performance journal, and we are moving there. And would see now the latest entry was feedback for Jody, and the source is performance feedback, right? So that's the different types of sources we have. Performance feedback, manager journal for the feedback that was created by managers, and my journal for entries I create for myself. And this is also the next step we're going to take and use the quick add functionality to create a new entry in our performance journal. The date, the name of the worker creating that journal entry, as well as the source are pre-populated. You can select whether you want to share that with your manager or not. And then the only mandatory field in addition to that is the title. And we will give it a description for sure as well. So Julia has driven a marketing campaign and adds that to her journal and makes that an entry so she doesn't forget about it when the review is executed, right? You can also create start and completed dates to determine the time frame something has happened in. You would also be able to provide keywords to have some sort of tagging, right? And external addresses is something we can provide as well, and set up whether the development plan would be an option here or not. So we have created now that new entry about the marketing campaign. Let's look at it, because if you are in the details of a performance journal, there are some more things you can do with it. You can add some notes to the performance journal entry. There's also a section for links where you can maintain links. We'll get back to that. And also attachments are something you can maintain on the performance journal entry. And as a next step, we want to already link that performance journal entry to an active review. So the add to review button allows us to do so. And the latest review that is open, the performance review, is selected in this case. And a click on OK simply connects the performance journal entry with that review. And you would see that in the links. The link type would be review, right? And you could also do the same for goals, right? You can see that the button on top, add to goal, would do just the same and link that performance journal to a goal. You could even link that one to both a review and a goal. That's it with the demonstration. Let's move on and review approaches and considerations around its approaches and considerations around reviews. Sorry. All right. The first one is workflows. Not all reviews likely need a workflow. You can optionally add a workflow to your review process when you use a review template. Examples where you likely do not want a workflow include more casual reviews like a one-on-one, whereas you might want a workflow for a review where you are putting a worker on a performance plan or a probation period, for example. In this example, you might want to send the review to HR for a final review and awareness of the performance plan. Another example might be a review where you have compensation tied to the review process. Let's assume you have an annual review process and workers receive compensation based on the rating, and upper management and HR need to approve the review prior to the compensation change. The next consideration is around the use of measurements and ratings. Again, you likely don't need these on every type of review. One-on-ones likely do not have the need for a measurement or rating. While you might want one set of measurements and ratings for a probation period, and a different set of ratings for your annual compensation-related reviews. You will also need to consider if you will use a number scale for your ratings or a performance descriptor. Many organizations are moving towards performance descriptors, such as "you're doing great" and "you are a game changer," and so on, as a way to help communicate the ratings to the employees better than assigning just a number. Next, you will want to consider your organization's timing and process for feedback and reviews. Many organizations are making a shift towards a continuous feedback approach, in which case the way you structure the review may be different than if you have a structured periodic review, such as annually or quarterly. Think about the type of information and frequency you want to collect information when creating your templates. And then finally, remember that your review process is a culture. And if you plan to make changes to your process, it takes time, communication, training, and so on to help make not only a system shift, but a culture shift. Next in the agenda is competencies. Let's start by reviewing different types of competencies we can track in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. The table here shows each different type of competency that can be tracked in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Skills are one of the most common types of competencies to be tracked. When you track skills, employees can manage themselves in ESS and managers can view the skills their team has in MSS. Tests are another type of competency that may be required by the HR team to keep track of which tests are needed and passed for a worker. You will notice that tests cannot be viewed or maintained by employees or managers. In addition, you can see that employees can manage their own certifications, educations, positions of trust, and professional experience. Managers do have the ability to view the certification information, and HR always can view and maintain the data from the worker record in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Keep in mind, these are out-of-the-box available interfaces. If your organization requires ESS or MSS capabilities beyond what is supported out of the box, you can extend your solution. Consider ISVs or build Power Apps as an example to enable the functionality for your users. In order to start using some of the competency features, you will need to complete some configurations. First are skills. You will need to create skill types, rating models, and skills. Think about how you want to report and the level of detail you want to track. Keep in mind that employees cannot freeform type a skill. They must select from a predefined list of skills. Next are certificates. You will need to create certificate types for each certificate. You can use a generic or broad approach to this or a very specific approach. Again, think about how you will report on this information. For example, you are a Dynamics consulting firm. You could create a generic certificate type for Dynamics certifications and Azure certifications. And each time a worker creates a new certificate, they will enter the details for that certificate. This way, you can report on how many people are certified for Dynamics versus Azure. If you need more specific certifications, you might create one certificate type for each exam or certificate available, such as MB300, MB700, etc. This more granular setup will enable you to report and identify exactly which certifications your workforce has. Certificates support the concept of expiry dates and requiring renewals. The renewal requirement can be set on the certificate type. Then, the same basic idea is true for tests as for certificates. Test types are different in that you can select a frequency basis, such as annual, monthly, weekly, daily, or one time. And another field allows you to enter the unit. For example, if you need quarterly, you can set the frequency basis to monthly and the frequency to 3. When you plan to track educational information, there are several configurations to consider. First are institutions. You can think of these like the college or university. Next are degrees. You can be basic with these or very specific, depending on your business requirements and reporting needs again. For example, you might just create bachelor's, master's, PhD, and so on, or you might create specific values like bachelor's of science, bachelor's of arts, etc. Education discipline categories are required in order to create education disciplines. For example, you might create 2 categories for scientists and engineers. For the scientists category, you could create specific disciplines such as chemistry, biology, physics, and so on. For the engineering category, you could create disciplines such as mechanical, electrical, and civil, just to give you some examples. Let's talk about approaches and considerations around our competencies. So when pursuing your approach to implementing competencies, keep these considerations in mind. First is the types of competencies to implement. You will want to consider if you want to implement each feature. When considering each feature, ask yourself, how will the data be used? If you track skills, for example, and create an overhead of tracking skills for your HR team, management team, or employees, if there's no perceived value or use of the data, adoption may suffer. Great reasons to track skills is for resources scheduling in a service-based organization or for skill mapping and gap analysis in growing organizations. Next, you will need to consider how data will be integrated or even migrated for the initial go live. If this is the first time you are tracking data, ensuring that you have good change management, including training and communication, will be critical to adoption. If you need to send the data to a downstream system, like an LMS or customer engagement, for example, consider the approach and where the data will be mastered. We always recommend that you master HR data, such as competencies, in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Once you have identified which feature will be implemented and how the data will be used, you'll need to consider who will maintain the data. Think again about your user experience and your organization's culture. Are you asking employees to maintain data that will be considered an overhead in the day-to-day work? There's no right or wrong answer here, but culture could affect adoption, and change management will be a key to successful implementation. Next, you will want to focus on the user experience. If you're asking employee or managers to maintain data, think about the types of devices they will use, and do they have access to a computer? How long does it take to enter the data you're asking, and so on. Simplify forms to eliminate fields that you do not require and test on devices that your workforce will be using. And then the same applies for the manager experience, keeping in mind that the out-of-the-box manager experience is primarily a view-only experience. Interview your managers to see what information is useful to them in the business decision-making process for reviews, promotions, etc. And lastly, you will want to consider the regulatory requirements. This might include reporting as well. If there are special formats that your local government require, and so on. Or if there are needs to track specific data for evidence in an audit, for example, consider the security and maintenance of the critical data. Now, let's move on and look into the skill gap analysis. There are 3 key features available out of the box that you can use to analyze skills. Let's compare them. The first is skill mapping. The idea here is that you will create a template called a skill mapping profile. You can retrieve the data from an existing person, job, or course in the system, or you can create the profile template manually. The profile can include certificates, skills, and education details that you want to search for. You can also add ranges to filter down the results and to rate the importance of certain factors in your search. When you view the results, you can view them on a screen in a grid layout as a report or as a graphical chart. Scenarios where this is useful is finding existing workforce that meets criteria for a possible raise, or transferring career development activities, or searching your system of contacts as candidates for open jobs. This really only applies if you integrate your ATS, for example, to import all candidates with competency data to analyze down the road. Next, we have the skill gap analysis. This tool serves really one purpose: to compare a specific person to a specific job. If a worker has requested a transfer, or you are analyzing the team to determine who's a good candidate for promotion, this can be a great tool. When you view the results, they are shown as a graph comparing the required skill from the job with the level to the skill the person has with the level of the skill. Managers can perform this from ESS, or HR can run this from the menu. And then lastly, we have the skill profile analysis. The tool allows you to look at the skills for a specific person as of a specific date, much like the skill gap analysis. The key difference here is that there's no comparison to a job. Okay, let's take a closer look at skill mapping. Skill mapping searches look across skills, education, certificates, positions of trust, and project experience and return a result that matches the criteria entered. For example, it might be useful to know which workers in your organization earned their CPA. Skill mapping profiles allow you to find current employees or candidates with qualifications that directly correspond to business needs. For example, you could create a skill mapping profile for an open position in your organization. By creating a profile for a particular job and copying the skills, education, and certificates from that job to the profile, you can quickly search workers, applicants, and contact persons who match one or more of the criteria entered on the profile, and view a list of the candidates whose skills most closely match the skills required for the job. Only workers, applicants, and contact persons who are selected to be included in the skill mapping searches can be displayed in a skill mapping result list or included in a skill profile. To include a worker, applicant, or contact person in skill mapping searches, set the Include in Skill Mapping selection to Yes in the following pages: worker, employee, applicant, and contacts. Managers have the ability to perform the skill gap analysis or the team skills assessment from the My Team tab in the employee self-service workspace. We'll take a close look at skill gap analysis next, but first, let's talk briefly about the team skills assessment. When you click this tile in the manager self-service area, you can see a chart of each skill your team has. Each worker is assigned to a different color. The level of the skill of the worker is represented by a bar for each skill. The higher the bar, the higher the skill level. If a worker does not show up on the chart, it indicates they do not have the skill. This data can be used to help determine team or individual goals for developing the needed skills of the team. Now, the next thing is going to be the second demo of the day about skill gap analysis. We've talked about that. So we're going to compare a job to the worker or vice versa. And that would be based on skills required for the job and the skills assigned to the worker. So remember Judy? She was the one we have sent feedback to before. And that positive feedback we gave her was well received, right? So, and now as she's thinking about making a change in her career and she's looking for a new role, she has reached out to us asking whether there would be a possibility to start in marketing. And now what we can do is we can use skill gap analysis to help us determine if and to what extent she would be a fit for such a role. Let's go to the employee self-service workspace, just for demonstration purposes, because Julia herself is a manager, right? And in the My Team tab, there's the skill gap analysis available as tile, and you can reach that from here. Now, what we would find is that Julia is only able to select members from her own team, which makes perfect sense, right? And Jody's not in her team yet. So she wouldn't be able to perform the task herself, but so she would need to hand that task over to HR or anyone else who has the permissions. And access the skill gap analysis through the menu directly and not from the workspace, which is limited then. Now, if you access through the menu, the item is skill gap analysis job person, we will see the exact same screen, but without the limitation on the selection of workers. So we can select Jody here. And her worker record has skills attached to it, right? So we have maintained Jody's skill data, basically. The kind of skills she has and at which level. Now, in addition to that, we're going to select a job, which is, in this case, marketing assistant. That's what she was asking for. And the update button in the upper left corner allows us to immediately do the analysis on the fly. And it comes up with that graph, right? And there's different representation you can pick from. And basically what we see here is the skills the job requires and the level for each of these in darker blue, and in lighter blue, we see what Jody has to offer. For instance, she doesn't have any CRM skills. But besides that, she would be a good fit. And besides that, you can, from this screen, also print the skill gap analysis, which might make sense. And there's some more information, like a table and stuff like that. All right. Let's move on in the agenda and talk a little bit about learning in Dynamics 365 human resources. So when deciding if you should implement the learning capabilities of Dynamics 365 human resources, there are some considerations you will want to keep in mind. First, let's talk about what the learning modules and features set in Dynamics 365 Human Resources is not. Dynamics 365 Human Resources is not a learning management system or a content management system. It is expected that you will bring your own LMS and or CMS system to integrate the data as needed. The learning features in Dynamics 365 HR can be used as a system of record for keeping track of the learning history. In other words, the courses your workforce has completed. You can also use it as a tool to help assign courses to workers or a mechanism for workers to sign up for available courses. Now, if you have decided to move forward with the learning features, you will want to consider the types of courses and data you need to track and report on. The solution works well out of the box for instructional training courses, but you may need to add fields to track additional information for self-paced courses, for example. Consider what data is needed for reporting versus what data the LMS or CMS will manage. If you don't have an LMS or CMS and need to surface training content and courses for your workforce, consider hosting your content in SharePoint, for example, and using links in Dynamics 365 to track the needed data. Usability, again, is key to adoption, so carefully consider the end-to-end flow for your workforce to sign up for, complete surveys, and report course completion. It is likely, again, and as said, that you will need to integrate your LMS or CMS solution with Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Keep in mind that APIs specific for learning management systems are on the roadmap. You may want to consider a simple phased approach that brings minimal viable data in now and upgrade your integration later once the APIs are available. The APIs are planned to be developed using the same approach as the ATS and payroll APIs are developed using virtual entities and the Dynamics 365 web APIs on the Dataverse. If you plan to build a custom integration, consider using the virtual entity approach, which aligns with our planned approach, or using data management entities with an Azure Logic app, for example. Consider the user experience and embed links or full-page apps in the employee self-service and manager self-service workspaces where possible to help drive adoption. So let's look into do's and don'ts we have come up for you and recap a little bit what we have covered today as well. First, the do's. It is really important, and that's a recurring pattern, right, to consider your organization's culture first before you set up HR or while you set up HR, right? It's really important to reflect your organization's culture in the system. Otherwise, you'll lack adoption. Interview the business to find out what is needed and useful and leave out what's not. At this point in time, you might reconsider that later. It is also important, again, adoption, to use personalization and do anything to make the system work as good as possible for your users, right? And then consider Dynamics 365 customer voice over questionnaire, in case you would consider questionnaire. Now, a few don'ts. Please do not create reference data for every user language. We have seen examples of that, and it's just not maintainable. It becomes a large list in, let's say, skills, and is overwhelming users, or would overwhelm users. Do not underestimate the need for change management when you roll out functionality. Do not use workflow with processes without specific business requirements. If there's no requirement to use a workflow, don't do it. And also, and we have talked about that, just do not use learning as an LMS or CMS, and don't expect it to do that for you. Finally, we have some checklists available for you. You know that already from previous Tech Talks, but these should help you to get the deck, go through them, and see whether you have covered all of these setup and activities in your modules. We have one for goals in this Tech Talk. We have one for reviews we talked about. We have one for skills. We have another one for the other competencies besides skills. And then finally, we have also one checklist for you available for learning. And you would also see in the left-hand side, there are links included in these checklist pages as well that help you to read further about these different areas. Now, this is almost the last slide, And it has some links and encourages you to, if you haven't, I guess you have, try Dynamics 365 Human Resources today. It has the link for trial sign up, and that would be potentially, if you are a partner, interesting, of course, to hand over to prospects, etc. Now, I would be finished with my presentation and would like to thank you. And we have some time, I think, for covering questions still. Rachel, do we have any questions that would be beneficial for the audience?
Yep. So we had two key questions come in. The first question was, what is the point of the percentage complete section on goals? How does it work, especially if it doesn't update on its own? Would we have the ability to connect to Power Automate in order to create a trigger, or can it only be manually edited on the system? So in general, this field is used to keep track of the progress towards completing a goal. It's most useful in scenarios where a goal has a lot of activities and is a more long-term goal, especially if you only have an annual review process and you might need to do a number of things to reach a particular goal. You can certainly hide the field if you do not need to use that field and it doesn't make sense for your culture or the types of goals that you're setting within your organization. That will make it easier and less confusing for your users. If you do have a need to keep track of that progress, you can certainly consider using a Power Automate flow as a means to either automatically update those goals based on other information coming from other systems, or even just send reminders to employees that they should go update their goals. So that was the first question. The second question that we had was, is there a first-party supported way for the skills data to flow to Dynamics 365 field service and or customer service? This is a great question. At this time, there is no out-of-the-box solution. It is something that the project operations team is actually investigating, because skills data is very commonly needed for resource scheduling with project operations, which obviously is also used in field service. It could be used in customer service as well. So the project operations team is investigating this. They haven't added anything officially to the roadmap, but it's something that they are looking at possibly adding after the HR infrastructure merge is completed. As a side note, once you have migrated to the Finance and Operations app infrastructure, you will be able to create your own dual write map to copy that data over to the Dataverse on the F&O infrastructure. So hopefully that helps answer the questions that we got in today's session. We do have a few minutes left, so if you have more questions, feel free to get those typed in. We did have some questions from the morning session around the fusion or the infrastructure merge. So I'll go ahead and paste in a few links that might be useful if you're interested in learning more about that infrastructure merge. This first link is to the frequently asked questions. We also have a link that I'm pasting in now, which is to the what's new. The core HR functionality is available with the 10.0.25 release, which you can get now on Preview Early Access Program. So we encourage you to check that out. And the last link, if you do have ideas or feedback about HR that you would like to see added, we encourage you to get those ideas put into the ideas site. I've put those 3 links in the chat. It doesn't look like we have any new questions that have come in, so I am going to hand it back over to David to wrap us up today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Volker. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. We would love for you to join us next Thursday for our session, Managing Employee and Manager Self-Service Experiences. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and our audience for joining us today.